Hello, I'm Marcus Hayes, back for another video about my old banger Ford Escorts. You join me from the driver's seat of Maude, my 2-litre Z-Tech powered Mark II that is currently out of action, and those who have been following my videos will know why. Today, I'm going to start the video talking about my other Escort, my ST170 powered Mark I. Loads of you have been in touch via social media to ask what's going on with the Mark I, and to say I've made progress would be a bit of an overstatement, but I did manage to spend a little bit of time on it the other day. It's really windy outside today, so apologies in advance for the poor quality of sound, but I'm hoping you'll at least be able to hear what I'm saying. So let's go and have a look at what's been going on with the Mark I. So here she is, all tucked away nice and safe. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, the next stage of this build is to take the engine and gearbox back out to see what's going on with the clutch. It'll also give me an opportunity to do a couple of things a little bit differently on the engine, so it's not all bad. Now, before I can take the engine and gearbox out, I've got to remove many of the parts that I managed to get fitted last year. And that's what I've made a start on doing. So the other day, I pulled the car out and removed the prop shaft and the exhaust system. And I've also removed the exhaust manifold and the throttle bodies. Next up, I'm probably going to remove the radiator and I'm going to remove the front bumpers. Now, the reason for that is that when I lower the engine and gearbox out of the bottom of the engine bay onto a trolley, I'm going to need to raise the shell up really high so that I can then roll the trolley clear of the car. And the way that I'm going to raise the car is by bolting the front part of my rollover jig to the shell, and that mounts to the same place that the front bumpers do. You'll see what I mean when I come to do it anyway. So as I said before, it's not really much in the way of progress on the Mark I, but as people have taken the time out to message me, I thought I might as well keep you posted on what has been going on. Now, there is something a little bit more interesting that I've been working on for the Mark I, which I've been doing indoors at home. And I'm going to show you that at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. Right, let's have a look what's been going on with the Mark II over the last week or so. Now, in the video I made where I repaired the drift damage to this driver's side rear quarter, I noticed that the rubber hose that goes from the filler to the tank was really badly cracked. So the other day I came around here and I was able to replace that. This is the old one. As you can see, it's totally had it. Now, sometimes the reason these start cracking is because these tanks are supposed to have little nylon spacers here and here. And I didn't have these fitted. I ordered these and replaced these when I replaced the rubber. The nylon spacers I got off eBay, and the rubber hose I got from a company called oldschooloval.com. I've used oldschooloval.com loads in the past, especially on my Mark I. Most of the stuff they make is brand new bolts and nuts and screws and clips made out of stainless steel, but they do loads of other parts as well, so definitely check them out. I'll leave a link to their website in the description of this video. Now, another thing I mentioned in a previous video is the problem I was having with these rubber O-rings that go with these bolts that hold the rocker cover down. I bought a set which were a little bit better from Burton Power, and I've now switched over to those. To be honest, they have also been chewed up by the washer a little bit. Not as bad, but at the end of the day, the rocker cover's on there and it's not leaking oil, which is good. I think the only way really to get them to not get chewed up by the washer is to use a genuine Ford bolts, and I'd hate to think how much they cost from Ford. I've jumped back in the Mark II out of the wind to show you something that I've sorted out regarding these bucket seats. Now, these are very old, very cheap Cobra seats that actually came fitted to my Mark I. I didn't like the way they were fitted to my Mark I when I bought the car, so I decided to make my own brackets that mount to the original runners. When I say brackets, they are basically just metal strips with holes drilled in them. Now, when I first made those brackets to fit them in the Mark I did so when there wasn't a steering column fitted. Now, I know we're in the Mark II at the moment, but I'll just show you what I mean. I used the two mounting points on the dashboard for the steering column. What I didn't realise then was that these steering columns actually come through the dashboard at an angle, and the steering wheel is basically on the piss. That is just how they are. So obviously, when I lined it up to the centre point of the two mounting points on the dashboard, it meant that the seat was actually mounted about an inch too far towards the centre of the car. If I just lean over, you might be able to see what I mean. The centre point between the two mounting points is here, whereas the steering wheel is here. So basically, what I did the other day, I removed both seats and then removed the seats from the brackets that are attached to the runners, and I just had to drill 2 extra holes in different positions and then bolt it all back together. And now the seat is mounted centrally with regards to where the steering wheel is. Not only does that mean that the car is going to feel a bit better to drive, but it also means there's now a larger gap between the two seats. One thing I want to fit in the not too distant future is a hydro handbrake, which will obviously need to be mounted somewhere between the two seats. So now that I've got the seats mounted properly, I can actually start doing some research and figuring out which hydro handbrake I'm going to use and then how I'm going to mount it. That probably won't be for a while yet, but I'll definitely keep you posted when I get round to it. So now I'm going to crack on with what I've got planned to do on the Mark II today. Right, so as I mentioned, the Mark II is out of action because of a really loud rattling sound coming from inside her bell housing. So I'm going to make a start today on taking everything apart to see what's going on. I've already got the car jacked up and I've already unbolted the prop shaft from the diff. And I've got the prop shaft cable tied to the gearbox so that it doesn't fall out. And then that way I won't spill any oil everywhere. Now, in theory, this should be really simple because I've obviously got the quick release inserts fitted to the bell housing. So hopefully all I need to do is remove the speedo cable, undo the bolts that are holding the bracket, and then undo the 4 Allen key bolts that hold the gearbox to the bell housing, and I should just be able to pull the gearbox off. Let's see. So there we go, gearbox is out without going through all the dramas of lowering the engine down. And the bell housing still attached to the engine with the clutch still inside. Now obviously the quick release inserts in the bell housing are designed so that you can change the gearbox without removing the bell housing from the engine. But with the gearbox now off, I will be able to get the bell housing off of the engine without lowering it down. Oh, I can already feel something loose in there. It's definitely something to do with the clutch that was making all the noise. There's something in there that's just free and spinning around on its own. Right, so now I'm going to remove the starter motor and disconnect the clutch cable. The rattling was obviously being caused by this clutch release bearing that has broken into 3 pieces. But I got a new one of them to go in along with a new clutch and a new flywheel, as I mentioned in my last video. And I've noticed that the pivot pin has come out of the bell housing again. Now I'm pretty sure that the reason this was weakened and then ultimately failed is because I ran the car for a couple of days with the gearbox to bell housing bolts too loose. Now I went on a drift day straight after I put the car back together, and I'm pretty sure that, you know, the bell housing would have still been flush with the gearbox at the drift day, but then over the course of a couple of days afterwards I started noticing that the clutch biting point was getting lower and lower, where obviously a gap had formed between the gearbox and the bell housing. Not only did that cause this bearing to break, but it's also caused a gearbox leak to start from the front of the gearbox. Now it'll either be the rubber seal inside here or the cork gasket here, and I've bought another one of each of those so that I can replace those and get this back in the car, which means I'll be able to get the car back on the road before I actually get my gearbox back from HPE Motorsport. It's actually starting to rain a little bit now. I'm going to be packing up soon, but one thing I want to do first, while the car's up in the air, is remove the old clutch. Yeah, on initial inspection, the clutch looks okay, but it is brand new, so that's to be expected now that I know that the actual rattle was caused by the clutch release bearing. But as I say, I've got a brand new clutch anyway, so this will just go in the garage as a spare. Right, that's all I'm going to be doing today. I'll cut straight to the bit that I've been working on for the Mark 1 indoors at home.
Right, so on the table here I have a bit of a homework project I've been working on for the Mark 1. This pile of parts used to be a set of 6-dial dash clocks from a Mark 1 Escort RS2000. My Mark 1 started life as a 1300E, so it would have come with a 6-dial dash from the factory, but I think the only difference is that the speedo only went up to 110 miles an hour instead of 130 miles an hour. I did have to do a little repair on the rev counter a few years ago, where I had to resolder one of these wires. I can't remember which one it was. Probably that yellow one, because the soldering looks a bit ropey. The reason I've taken it apart this time is because I want to fit this VDO fuel gauge, which came with my alloy fuel tank last year. The original fuel gauge sits in there like that, and I want to try and fit the VDO fuel gauge in the same place. Now the first thing I did was I took this VDO fuel gauge apart, because otherwise I would have had to drill a massive hole to slot this whole thing in there. So now I end up with this. I did break it a little bit when I took it apart. Now in the back of here you've got these two terminals, and they just push into them holes like that. But this one unfortunately didn't survive. Now if anyone's got any idea what these terminals are called or where I can get them from, do let me know in the comments, because I haven't been able to find a replacement. It's basically a pin one end and a spade the other end. The closest thing I've been able to find are these. Now the red one and the blue one, the pin is far too narrow, so it's not a tight fit, and the yellow one, the pin is too wide, which is okay because I can file it down and make it work. And I've actually made this from one of the yellow ones, where basically I took the yellow bit off, and obviously under there's a cylindrical bit of metal, because it's basically a crimp, and basically I flattened out that cylindrical metal bit and then cut bits off it until it's the right size to fit a female spade terminal onto it. If I can get another one of these, obviously I'd prefer to use one of them. So once I'd taken the VDO fuel gauge apart, it was time to see how I can get it mounted in here. Now the first thing I noticed is that this is far too deep, so I've had to basically make a dimple in the back of this. It does look a bit bent up and that, but I'll make it look pretty afterwards. And then I noticed that it needed to sit down in the casing, so I started grinding out some of this part of it. So basically that sits in there like that. If I just put the front on, you can see that it's somewhat in line. Obviously I'm going to need to cut this out so it's a complete circle, and then it should work. A couple of other things I've done just to make it so it's not sitting too tall. This spindle comes off, and I've actually shaved the underneath of it a bit, and also the pin that it attaches to, I'll shave that down as well, just to make it all a little bit narrower, so that when it's in there it will be sitting just as high as the original ones. Yeah, so it's somewhere near now. I just need to adjust this a bit more, and then once I've got it fully where I want it, I'll probably end up putting a strip of metal in here and fiberglass in it and making it look a bit better. Now I've got these RS2000 clocks quite cheap, and one of the reasons was that all this chrome is pretty badly chipped off, and there's loads of roughness around here where I think the original wood would have been glued down. Now for what I've got planned for this, none of that matters, and you'll see what I mean once I've finished this and put it all back together. I'm probably going to have to change this speedo for either a GPS speedo or run a speed sensor on the prop shaft or one of the front wheels and get an aftermarket speedo, so this won't be staying forever. And I'll probably end up getting a different rev counter as well, because this one only goes up to 7,000. But at the moment I just want to get the fuel gauge in there, do what I plan to do with this to make it look a bit more pretty, and then get it all back together and get it in the car. Anything else I'll worry about after the car's on the road. So that's my little homework project for the Mark 1. Looks a right state at the moment while it's in bits, but once I've done what I need to and put it all back together, it will be sweet. I'm going to end this video here. The next video should be me getting the Mark II back on the road. If you thought this video was any good, please do give it a thumbs up and a share. And if you haven't already done so, do subscribe to the channel to be kept right up to date with future uploads. And don't forget to activate that notification bell. Feel free to check out my Facebook and my Instagram, and I'll leave the links you need for that in the description of this video. Until next time, thanks for watching.